The Ohio River ran dark and wide at dusk, its surface rippling with currents that could pull a boat sideways or turn it clean around if the oarsman wasn't careful. Lena stood on the southern bank, her bare feet pressed into mud still warm from the day's sun, and stared at the far shore. Freedom sat somewhere beyond that water, close enough to see, too far to trust. The air smelled of wet earth and wood smoke from distant cabins. Mosquitoes hummed near the reeds. Somewhere upstream, a heron called once, then went silent. Bo, the old stable hand who'd guided runaways for 20 years, crouched beside her, his voice low. "You remember the route?" Lena nodded. She remembered everything. The whispered instructions from 3 nights ago had come from a woman passing through a conductor on the underground road who spoke in codes and hand signals. Shallow crossing near the bent willow. Avoid the deep channel where the current runs fast. Land at the clearing with the split rock. 3 lantern flashes mean safe. To means turn back. Lena had heard it once. That was enough. Her gift had always been memory perfect, unwavering, the kind that stored every word, every detail, every inflection. She didn't understand why. She only knew it worked. Upstream, hunters' lanterns flickered yellow pinpoints moving slow along the bank, dogs barking in short, sharp bursts. They were searching, always searching. The Fugitive Slave Act had made hunting people profitable, and men with rifles and hounds worked the river like trappers worked beaver runs. Lena began to hum, soft and low, a hymn her mama used to sing before she was sold south. The sound steadied her breathing, slowed her racing heart. The melody was simple, just 4 notes repeated, a pattern that calmed crying babies and spooked horses. Bo glanced at her, then at the small group huddled behind them in the tree line. A mother with 2 children, both under 10. A young man with a limp from a broken leg that had healed wrong. An older woman clutching a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, probably everything she owned in the world. "We go now," Bo whispered. Before the moon rises, fog began to roll in from the water, thick and cold, swallowing the opposite shore piece by piece. It moved like something alive, creeping over the surface, erasing landmarks. Lena gripped the ribbon tied around her wrist, yellow fabric, frayed at the edges, a marker from her mama. The ribbon had been part of a dress mama wore on Sundays, back when there were Sundays that mattered. Lena had torn a strip from the hem the morning mama was sold away, and she'd kept it ever since. She whispered a prayer under her breath. "Lord, guide us safe. Lord, keep the hunters blind," and followed Bo toward the hidden boat. The boatman waited in the reeds, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, his hands rough and calloused from years of working oars. He didn't speak. He just gestured them aboard with quick, silent movements. "Hurry, hurry, no time." Lena climbed in first, settling at the front of the flat cotton skiff. The wood was damp, slick with river moss. She tucked her skirt around her legs and gripped the edge. The others followed, mother first, then the children, then the young man who winced as he bent his bad leg. The older woman came last, her bundle pressed tight to her chest. The boat rocked and creaked under their weight. Water sloshed over the side, cold against Lena's feet. The boatman pushed off with a pull, and the current grabbed them immediately. The skiff swung sideways, then straightened as the boatman corrected with practiced ease. Upstream, the hunters' lanterns turned toward the water. Dogs barked louder now, frantic and eager. Lena's pulse spiked. She could hear the hounds baying long, mournful howls that meant they'd caught a scent. She reached for the lantern at her feet, a tin box with a shuttered opening, the kind used to signal at night without showing too much light. She angled it carefully, not toward the hunters, but toward the shallow crossing she'd memorized. The light caught the water at just the right angle, revealing the ripple pattern that marked the safe path. The dog's barking faltered. Lena held one pure note, high and steady, her perfect pitch cutting through the night like a blade. The sound confused the hounds. Their barking stopped, replaced by whining and uncertain huffing. Bo exhaled slow, his breath visible in the cold air. "Lord have mercy." The boatman's oars dipped into the water, quiet, rhythmic, sure. He rowed with long strokes, pulling them toward the center of the river where the current ran fastest, but the fog was thickest. The mother in the boat clutched her children close, one on each side. The youngest, a boy, maybe 6 years old, started to cry. The mother clamped a hand over his mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Lena shifted her hum to a lullaby, the kind mama used to sing. The melody was slower, gentler, designed to soothe. The boy's crying softened to hiccups, then stopped altogether. The young man with the limp gripped the side of the boat, his knuckles white. His breathing came fast and shallow, panic breathing, the kind that could make a person faint. Lena kept the lullaby going, matching the tempo to his gasps. Gradually, his breathing slowed, his grip loosened. The older woman prayed under her breath, her lips moving in silent rhythm. Lena couldn't hear the words, but she recognized the cadence, the Lord's Prayer, repeated over and over like a charm. They were halfway across when the hunters reached the bank. Shouts echoed over the water, harsh, angry voices demanding stops and searches. A lantern swung wild, its beam cutting through the fog in jagged arcs. But the fog was thick now, and the water glare moonlight bouncing off the ripples made it impossible to see clearly. The surface looked like hammered silver, blinding and beautiful. The hunters shielded their eyes, cursing. One of them fired a rifle into the air, a warning shot, the crack loud enough to scatter birds from the trees. Lena flinched, but kept humming. Her voice was the only thing holding them together. The boatman didn't pause. His oars kept their rhythm: dip, pull, lift, dip, steady as a heartbeat. 20 minutes stretched into eternity. Every oar stroke felt too loud. Every breath felt too visible. Every ripple felt like a signal flare pointing straight at them. But the fog held, the glare held, and the hunters couldn't see. One of the dogs broke free and plunged into the water, swimming hard toward the boat. The hunter on the bank shouted, "Get back here, you fool hound." But the dog kept coming. Lena held her note higher, shifting the pitch slightly. The dog's head turned, confused. It paddled in a circle, then turned back toward shore. The hunter waded in and grabbed the dog by the scruff, dragging it back to land. More cursing, more shouting, but they didn't follow. The far bank loomed ahead, dark trees, rocky shore, safety. The boat scraped against the shallows with a sound like a sigh. Bo jumped out first, his boots splashing in ankle-deep water. He steadied the hull while the others climbed out. Lena was last. She stepped into the cold river, her feet sinking into soft mud, and looked back at the southern bank. The hunters' lanterns were distant now, blurred by fog. The dogs had gone silent. They'd made it. The group stumbled onto the northern bank, exhausted and trembling. The mother collapsed onto a rock, pulling her children close. The young man sank to his knees, his bad leg giving out. The older woman stood frozen, staring at the ground as if she couldn't believe it was real. Lena sat on a fallen log and began the lullaby again, slow and calming. She matched the rhythm to the mother's gasping breaths, for counts in, for counts out, steady and sure. Gradually, the panic eased. The mother's breathing slowed. The children stopped shaking. Bo stood at the water's edge, listening. No pursuit, no dogs, just the river slapping against the pilings and the fog rolling thick and gray. The boatman pushed the skiff back into the current and disappeared without a word. He had other crossings to make tonight. Bo turned to the group. "We need to move. Dawn's coming, and there'll be patrollers on this side too." The young man struggled to his feet. "How far to the next station?" 3 miles, maybe 4. Through the woods. The older woman clutched her bundle tighter. "I can walk." "Then we walk," Bo said. "Lena leads." They followed a narrow path through the trees, barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness. Lena walked at the front, her memory guiding her. She'd heard descriptions of this route from the same conductor who told her about the river crossing. Follow the ridge north, stay above the marsh. Look for the oak with the split trunk. Turn east at the lightning-struck pine. She saw the oak exactly where it should be. The split trunk glowed pale in the moonlight. Behind her, the group moved in silence. The mother carried the youngest child now, his arms wrapped around her neck. The older child walked beside them, her hand gripping her mother's skirt. The young man limped but kept pace. The older woman breathed hard but didn't complain. The air smelled of wet leaves and pine sap. An owl called from somewhere overhead. The forest was waking up, birds beginning to chirp, squirrels rustling in the underbrush. They reached the lightning-struck pine just as the sky began to lighten. Bo stopped, holding up a hand. "Listen." Lena froze. She heard it, hoofbeats on the road ahead. Slow, steady, the rhythm of a patrol. Bo gestured them into the brush. They crouched low, hidden by ferns and brambles. A patroller rode past on a gray horse, his rifle across his saddle, his eyes scanning the trees. He was young, maybe 20, his face bored and tired. He didn't see them. When the hoofbeats faded, Bo motioned them forward. We're close. Quarter mile, maybe less. The next station was a barn on the edge of a Quaker farm, whitewashed boards, a peaked roof, a weather vane shaped like a rooster. The door stood slightly ajar. Bo knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 times. A woman appeared middle-aged, her hair tucked under a plain cap, her dress simple and neat. Mrs. Harrow, the Quaker neighbor who'd been sheltering runaways for years. "Come in," she whispered. Quickly, they filed into the barn. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of hay and horses. Lantern light flickered from a corner where blankets had been spread on the floor. Mrs. Harrow handed out tin cups of water and chunks of cornbread wrapped in cloth. "Rest, but we can't stay long." The mother fed her children first, breaking the cornbread into small pieces. The young man ate slowly, wincing with each swallow. The older woman just held the bread, staring at it like she'd forgotten how to eat. Lena took a sip of water and felt the cold spread through her chest. She was exhausted, bone-tired, the kind of tired that made her hands shake, but her mind was still sharp. "What's next?" she asked Mrs. Harrow. "Town. We need to reach the probate office before they finalize the records." "What records?" "Manumission papers, debts, property claims. There's a reading today moved up early. If we don't get there in time, the forgeries will be sealed as legal." Lena's stomach tightened. "Forgeries?" Mrs. Harrow nodded. "The clerk's gone missing. Someone else has been using his seal, pressing papers that aren't lawful." Bo cursed under his breath. "Crawford, most likely," Mrs. Harrow said. "He's been pressuring the courthouse for weeks. Wants debts finalized before anyone can challenge them." Lena thought about the stories she'd heard about overseers who forged records to keep people enslaved even after they should have been freed. About debts that were recorded twice to trap families in bondage. About seals and ribbons that looked official but weren't. "We need to see those papers," Lena said. Mrs. Harrow studied her. "You can read seals. I can remember them. I only need to see something once." Mrs. Harrow's eyes widened slightly, then she nodded. "Then you're coming with me." They left the barn as the sun cleared the horizon. Lena, Bo, and Mrs. Harrow in a covered wagon. The others would stay hidden until it was safe to move. The wagon creaked and swayed over the rutted road. Lena sat in the back, hidden under canvas and burlap sacks. Through a gap in the fabric, she could see the sky pale blue, streaked with clouds. Mrs. Harrow drove, her hands steady on the reins. Bo sat beside her, his eyes scanning the road ahead. They passed farms and fields, cabins with smoke rising from chimneys, a blacksmith shop with its forge already glowing. The town wasn't far now. A church bell rang in the distance 7 chimes. Early morning, reading day. Lena's heart began to race. She closed her eyes and whispered the route one more time, fixing every detail in memory. Probate office, back room, look for the seal impressions. Check the wax color. Check the letter form depth. The wagon slowed. Mrs. Harrow's voice was calm but urgent. "Patrollers ahead. Stay quiet." Lena held her breath. The patroller's voice was sharp. "Stop there. What's your business?" Mrs. Harrow's reply was steady. "Delivering supplies to town. Eggs and butter for the market. Papers." Lena heard the rustle of documents being handed over. She pressed herself flat against the wagon bed, her pulse pounding in her ears. The patroller's boots scraped the dirt as he walked around the wagon. Dogs huffed and sniffed near the wheels. Then, miracle or providence, the dogs settled. Lena hadn't even hummed. They just stopped. The patroller grunted. "Move along." The wagon creaked forward. Lena exhaled slow, her whole body shaking. Bo's voice was low. "That was too close. They're watching everyone," Mrs. Harrow said. "Crawford's got them on edge." Lena shifted under the canvas, trying to find a position that didn't press on her ribs. "How much farther?" "We're here." The wagon stopped. Lena heard the bustle of market day voices calling, chickens clucking, wagon wheels creaking. Mrs. Harrow climbed down and spoke to someone, a shopkeeper, maybe, or a merchant. Bo tapped the canvas. "Wait for the signal." Lena waited, counting her breaths. 1, 2, 3. Then Bo's hand appeared, pulling back the canvas. "Now!" She climbed out, her legs stiff from crouching. The town square stretched before her, cobblestones, brick buildings, a courthouse with white columns, and somewhere inside, papers were being sealed with lies. The probate office sat behind the courthouse, a low brick building with narrow windows and a heavy oak door. Lena stood across the street, watching people come and go, clerks carrying ledgers, townsmen arguing about debts, a lawyer with a leather satchel. Mrs. Harrow touched her shoulder. The clerk's assistant will let us in through the back, but we have to wait until the reading starts. Everyone will be distracted. Bo nodded toward the courthouse steps. Looks like it's starting now. A crowd was gathering, farmers in work clothes, merchants in coats, freedmen standing at the edges, and plantation owners pressing toward the front. A deputy stood at the top of the steps, holding a stack of ribbon-tied papers. Church bells ring urgent, insistent. 9 chimes. Reading day. Mrs. Harrow said quietly. They've moved it up by 3 hours. Lena's stomach dropped. Why? Because someone's trying to bury the truth before anyone can check. They slipped around the side of the probate office, staying in the shadows. The back door stood slightly ajar. Mrs. Harrow knocked to soft taps. A young man appeared, pale, nervous, his collar loose. The clerk's assistant. Hurry, he whispered, before someone sees. They stepped inside. The back room was dim, lit only by a single lantern. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with ledgers and deed boxes. A desk sat in the center, covered with papers and wax sticks. Lena's eyes went immediately to the documents on the desk. Fresh seals, ribbon ties, ink still drying. She picked up the nearest paper, studying the wax impression. Her memory pulled forward every seal she'd ever seen, hundreds of them, catalogued and stored. This one was wrong. The letter form was shallow. The wax color was too pale. The ribbon was green when it should have been blue. This is a forgery, she said quietly. The assistant's face went white. How can you tell? I remember what the real ones look like. I saw them once, 2 years ago, when I was sent to clean the courthouse. The clerk was pressing seals, and I watched. The real seal has deep letters and dark wax. This one's shallow and pale. She set down the forged paper and pulled an older document from the shelf, one sealed years before. The difference was undeniable. Bo leaned close. If Crawford finds out, you know. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. The assistant grabbed Lena's arm. Hide. Now. They ducked behind a stack of deed boxes just as the door opened. Crawford's voice was sharp, impatient. Where's the ledger? The one with the double debts. The assistant's reply was shaky. Still filing, sir. Should have it ready by noon. Noon's too late. The reading's happening now. I need those debts finalized before anyone starts asking questions. But the clerk's gone. You're sealing the papers. Use the ring I gave you. Lena pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. Through a gap in the boxes, she could see Crawford, tall, broad-shouldered, his face red with frustration. He pulled a pouch from his coat and tossed it on the desk. Brass ring. Close enough to fool anyone who's not looking close. The assistant opened the pouch. Inside, a seal ring. Not iron, but brass. Similar to the real one, but wrong in subtle ways. Crawford turned to leave, then paused. And if anyone asks about church evidence, quilts, Bibles, any of it, you tell them it burned in a fire last week. But it didn't. It will if I say it did. Crawford's boots echoed down the hall. The door slammed. The assistant stood frozen, staring at the brass ring in his hand. Lena stepped out from behind the boxes. Don't use that ring. The assistant jumped. You heard. I heard. And I know what that ring is. It's a forgery. If you use it, you're helping him trap people. The assistant's hand shook. If I don't, he'll have me arrested. Or worse. Mrs. Harrow stepped forward, her voice calm. Then we take the ring. We press it beside the real one in front of the whole town. Let everyone see the difference. The assistant looked at the ring, then at Lena. You really think people will believe a child over Crawford? They'll believe the wax, Lena said. Wax doesn't lie. They left through the back door, the brass ring hidden in Lena's pocket. Outside, the storm was building, dark clouds rolling in from the west, wind picking up, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Bo looked at the sky. We need to move. Storm's going to hit hard. They hurried toward the chapel, staying off the main roads. The wind whipped Lena's skirt around her legs, and the first drops of rain began to fall, fat, cold, stinging. Reverend Pike met them at the chapel door, his face lined with worrying. Crawford's threatening to burn everything. Says the quilts and ledgers are evidence of plotting. Then we need to see them now, Lena said, Before he gets the chance, Pike led them to the basement, a low-ceilinged room that smelled of old wood and candle wax. He opened a trunk in the corner, and Lena's breath caught. Inside, quilts folded with care, their stitching intricate and deliberate, ledgers bound with ribbon, letters tied in bundles. Lena knelt beside the trunk, her eyes scanning the quilt on top. The stitching wasn't random. It was a map, roads marked in thread, crossings indicated by symbols, safe paths coded into fabric. Her memory locked onto it. Every line, every turn, every landmark. This quilt, she whispered, it's a route map for people crossing north. Pike nodded. Made by conductors 30 years ago. Passed down through stations. Lena traced the stitching with her finger. One intersection looked familiar, a fork in the road near a bent willow. The same crossing she'd used at the river. This is proof, she said. Not just of roots, of promises, of mercy stitched into cloth. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the chapel walls. Rain began to drum on the roof, hard, relentless. Pike closed the trunk. We need to get this to the courthouse. But the bridge won't hold, Bo said, looking out the small basement window. Flood's coming. Lena stood, her mind racing. She thought about the dream she'd had nights ago, a road that stayed dry when everything else flooded. A path marked by a leaning fence post and an oak grove. There's another way, she said. A back road. Higher ground. Mrs. Harrow frowned. That road's narrow, dangerous in a storm. But it's the only way that won't flood. Bo looked at Lena, then at the rising water visible through the window. You sure? I dreamed it. Same as I dreamed the river crossing. Pike's eyes widened. You dreamed the crossing. Before it happened. Lena nodded. I saw the fog rolling in. I saw the way the moonlight would hit the water. I knew we'd make it because I'd already seen it. Pike crossed himself. The Lord sends warnings to those who listen. Mrs. Harrow made a decision. Then we trust the dream, get the mule hitched. The storm hit with full force as they loaded the wagon. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the road into a river. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the chapel in stark white flashes. Lena climbed onto the wagon seat, the quilt trunk secured in the back. Bo sat beside her, holding the reins. Mrs. Harrow and Pike followed in a second wagon, carrying the ledgers. The mule balked at first, ears flat against the rain. But Lena began to hum the same calming melody she'd used on the dogs, and the animal settled. They moved out, the wagon wheels churning through mud. The main road was already underwater, a brown torrent sweeping debris downstream. Lena guided Bo toward the back road, her memory sharp despite the chaos. Left at the oak grove, she called, over the storm. Then straight past the leaning fence post. Bo squinted through the rain. I can't see anything. Trust me. I know where it is. They turned left. The road climbed slightly, just enough to stay above the flood. The oak grove appeared exactly where Lena said it would, dark trees with gnarled trunks, their branches heavy with rain. The leaning fence post came next, tilted at an angle like it was pointing the way. Bo shook his head in wonder. How did you know? I saw it. In the dream. Every detail. They climbed higher, the road winding through hills. The flood couldn't reach them here. Through the rain and fog, a shape appeared, tall, narrow, standing like a marker. A ferry pole. There, Lena said. That's the crossing. The ferry was a flat barge, half submerged in rising water. The ferryman stood at the pole, an old man with a grizzled beard, his coat soaked through. Last trip, he shouted over the storm. After this, the landing's gone. They guided the wagons onto the barge, the wood groaning under the weight. The ferryman pushed off, and a current grabbed them immediately. The river was wild now, churning, debris-filled, dangerous. A tree branch swept past, missing the barge by inches. Lena gripped the rail, her knuckles white. She began to hum again, trying to calm her own racing heart. The ferryman worked the pole with practiced skill, angling against the current, keeping them steady. The crossing took twice as long as it should have, every moment feeling like they might capsize. But they made it. The barge scraped against the far landing, and Bo jumped off to secure the wagons. They unloaded quickly, the rain still pouring, and moved toward town. Through the thinning storm, Lena could see at the courthouse, its white columns glowing in the gray light. The crowd was still gathered, pressed under eaves and awnings, waiting for the reading to continue. They'd made it, barely, but they'd made it. Bo pulled the wagon to a stop near the side entrance. Lena climbed down, her dress soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She reached into her pocket and felt the brass ring still there, still proof. Mrs. Harrow appeared beside her, carrying the quilt trunk. Ready? Lena nodded. Ready. They walked toward the courthouse steps, and the crowd turned to look. Crawford stood at the top, his face thunderous. When he saw Lena, his eyes narrowed. "What's this?" he demanded. Lena held up the brass ring. "This is yours, the one you've been using to forge papers," the crowd murmured. Crawford's face went red. "That's a lie. I don't know what you're talking about." "Then let's test it," Lena said. "Press this ring beside the real one. Let everyone see." The deputy stepped forward, uncertainty on his face. "The clerk's not here. The clerk's been riding through the storm," a voice called from the back of the crowd. Everyone turned. The real clerk stumbled forward soaked, exhausted, his coat torn. He'd been trying to reach town before Crawford could finish the fraud. He held up his hand, showing the iron ring, the real seal. "I have the official ring," he gasped. "Let's see what the brass one shows." The crowd pressed forward, hungry for truth. The courthouse steps became a stage, and every eye was fixed on the two seal rings, brass and iron, forgery and law. The deputy set up a small table, his hands shaking slightly. He warmed a stick of wax over a candle flame, the red wax dripping like blood. Crawford tried to push through. "This is absurd. The child's lying," but townsmen blocked his path. They wanted to see. The deputy pressed the brass ring into the warm wax first. The impression came up shallow, the letters slightly crooked, the cross at the center tilted. Then the clerk stepped forward with the iron ring. He pressed it beside the brass impression, firm and sure. The difference was immediate, undeniable. The iron seal cut deep, clean letters, straight cross, perfect alignment. The brass seal looked like a child's copy beside it. The crowd erupted. Voices rose in shock and anger. "Forgery! He's been sealing false papers. How many debts were recorded with that fake ring?" The debt agent from the front row stood, his face grave. "Every paper sealed with that brass ring is void. No, worthless." Crawford backed toward the edge of the crowd, his face pale. "You can't prove we can prove the ring is yours," Lena said quietly. "I saw you drop it. I heard you tell the assistant to use it." The assistant stepped forward, his voice shaking. "It's true. He gave me the brass ring 3 days ago. Told me to seal papers before anyone could check them." Crawford lunged toward the assistant, but deputies grabbed him. "You'll hang for this, boy." "No," the agent said firmly. "He'll testify." "And you'll face trial?" Crawford was dragged away, shouting threats and curses. The crowd parted to let him through, their faces hard. Reverend Pike stepped onto the courthouse steps, carrying the quilt trunk. He set it down carefully and opened the lid. The crowd went silent, watching. Pike lifted the top quilt, the one with the stitched map. He unfolded it slowly, revealing the intricate pattern of roads and crossings. "This quilt," he said, his voice carrying across the square, "was made 30 years ago by people who needed to remember routes when paper was too dangerous. Every stitch is a direction. Every symbol is a landmark." He pointed to one section of stitching. "This here, that's the Ohio River crossing. The bent willow, the split rock, all coded into thread." Lena stepped forward. "I used that map 2 nights ago. It guided us across. Every detail was exactly as stitched." The crowd murmured, "Odd." Pike continued, "But it's more than a map. Look here." He indicated the binding along the edge of the quilt. "There's a clause sewn into the fabric, a manumission promise tied to an oath." He loosened the binding carefully, and a strip of fabric unfolded. Stitched into it were words, "Freedom sworn upon oath, sealed by witness, bound by honor." The crowd pressed closer, reading. "This oath," Pike said, "was made by a plantation owner 30 years ago. He promised to free everyone on his land if certain debts were paid." The debts were paid, but the promise was hidden. The clerk stepped forward, studying the stitched words. "This is binding, legally binding. If the debts referenced here were paid, the manumission stands." The agent nodded slowly. "Then we need the ledger that shows those debts, the real ledger, not the forged one." Mrs. Harrow brought forward a second trunk, this one containing ledgers wrapped in oilcloth. The clerk opened the top ledger carefully, its pages brittle with age. He scanned the entries, his finger running down the columns. Then he stopped. Here, he said, double debts. Recorded twice to keep people in bondage even after payment was made. He read aloud, Whitmore estate debt recorded March 1820, paid in full June 1820, recorded again September 1820 as unpaid. Seal impression, brass. The crowd's murmur turned angry. The debt was paid, the clerk continued. But someone used a forged seal to make it look unpaid. To trap people who should have been free. He turned the page. And here manumission clause voided by false debt. But the clause was sworn. It can't be voided by fraud. The agent stood. Then the clause stands. Who was bound by this oath? The clerk read the names, slowly, clearly, so everyone could hear. Families who'd been enslaved for 30 years. Children born into bondage that should have ended before they were born. People who'd aged and died waiting for a promise that had been buried under lies. Lena listened to the names, memorizing each one. Her gift demanded it. When the clerk finished, the square was silent. Even the wind had stopped. Then a woman in the crowd spoke cold, her voice cracking. My mama's name was on that list. She died 10 years ago. Still enslaved. She was supposed to be free. The clerk looked at her, his face heavy with sorrow. I'm sorry. The woman's tears fell. Others in the crowd wiped their eyes. The agent turned to the courthouse. Is the current owner of the Whitmore estate present? A man stepped forward, middle-aged, his clothes fine but worn. Whitmore's son. He looked shaken, pale. I didn't know, he said. My father never told me about the oath. Ignorance doesn't void the law, the agent said. The oath stands. The debts are void. The manumission must be honored. Whitmore's son trembled. But the estate, the debts are real now. I can't afford. Then you sell land to pay what's owed, the agent said firmly. But you honor the oath your father swore. The clerk prepared fresh papers, writing carefully at the courthouse table. Lena watched his hand move smooth, practiced, the quill scratching across parchment. He dipped the quill in ink, blotted it, wrote again. Manumission granted per oath of 1820. Debts voided. Freedom confirmed. He slid the paper toward Whitmore's son. Sign here. The man's hand shook as he took the quill. He hesitated, looking at the crowd, at the quilts, at the ledger. Then he signed. The clerk took the iron ring, the real seal, and pressed it into fresh green wax. The impression came up clean and deep. He held up the paper for all to see. Witnessed and sealed. Legal and binding. The crowd erupted not in anger this time, but in something closer to relief. Justice, finally? Truth, finally? Reverend Pike raised his hands. Let's move to the church porch. This deserves proper witness. The procession moved slowly. Crowd, clerks, freed families, townspeople. Even some of the patrollers followed, uncertain but curious. The church sat at the top of a low hill, its white steeple visible from anywhere in town. The porch was wide, with benches and posts. Pike stood at the front, the signed papers in his hand. He read them aloud again, every name, every clause, every seal. When he finished, he invited the freed families to step forward. One by one, they came. Old and young, mothers and children, men who'd worked fields their entire lives. Pike handed each of them a copy of the manumission paper, sealed and signed. This is yours, he said to each person. Guard it, pass it down. Don't let anyone take it from you. Tears fell. Hands shook, but the papers were held tight. Lena stood at the edge of the porch, watching. She felt Beau's hand on her shoulder. You did this, he said quietly. Your memory, your courage. Lena shook her head. The quilt did it. The stitching. The people who made it. They made the map. You followed it. Lena thought about that. About the river crossing, the fog, the dream that had guided them to safety. About the seal impressions, the wax colors, the tiny details that had exposed the fraud. I just remembered, she said. That's all, that's everything, Beau replied. One of the freed men, older, his hair gray, stepped forward. He'd been a patroller once, years ago, before age and conscience had worn him down. He looked at Lena, his face heavy with shame. I hunted people. I chased them with dogs. I believed I was upholding the law. Lena met his eyes but said nothing. I was wrong, he continued. The law was a lie. And children like you, his voice broke. Children like you had more courage than I ever did. He bowed his head. Pike stepped forward, his hand on the man's shoulder. Repentance is the first step. What comes next is up to you. The man nodded. I'll testify, against Crawford, against anyone who forged papers or hunted people who should have been free. The crowd murmured approval. As the sun began to set, Pike called for a hymn. The crowd joined, voices rising in a melody Lena recognized. The same one Mama used to sing. Lena hummed along, her perfect pitch finding the harmony beneath the melody. The sound filled the porch, spilled into the street, carried across the town. Even the patrollers who'd followed stood silent, heads bowed. When the hymn ended, Pike spoke a blessing. Go in peace, walk in freedom, remember mercy. The crowd began to disperse, slowly, reluctant to break the moment. Lena lifted her lantern, the same one she'd used at the river crossing. She turned toward the road out of town. Where now? Bo asked. North, Lena said. To the settlement Mrs. Harrow told us about, where the papers will be honored. Bo nodded. Then we go north. They traveled by night, a small caravan moving quietly through the darkness. Lena and Bo in the first wagon, the freed families in wagons behind them, Mrs. Harrow and Reverend Pike bringing up the rear. The road was rough, still muddy from the storm, but passable. The mule pulled steady, its ears forward, trusting Lena's hand on the reins. The lawful papers were tucked inside Lena's coat, sealed and witnessed. She could feel them against her ribs with every breath, proof that freedom was real, not just a dream. They'd been traveling for 2 hours when they saw the first patrol. 2 men on horses, lanterns swinging, rifles across their saddles. They blocked the road ahead. Stop there, one of them called. Bo pulled the wagon to a halt. Lena's heart raced, but she kept her face calm. The patroller rode closer, his lantern illuminating the wagon. Where are you headed? North, Bo said. To the Quaker settlement. Papers. Bo handed over the passes Mrs. Harrow had prepared. The patroller studied them, his eyes narrowing at the seals. Lena watched his face, reading every flicker of doubt. Then she spoke, her voice clear. Those seals were pressed today. At the courthouse, in front of witnesses. The clerk can verify them if you want to ride back and ask. The patroller looked at her, a child, barefoot, covered in road dust, and something in her steady gaze made him hesitate. He handed the papers back. Move along. The wagon creaked forward. Lena didn't exhale until they'd rounded the bend and the patrollers were out of sight. That was risky, Bo muttered. Truth isn't risky, Lena said. Lies are. They were stopped twice more before dawn. Each time, the seals held. Each time, the patrollers waved them through, reluctant, suspicious, but unable to challenge papers that were clearly legal. The sky began to lighten as they climbed a long hill. At the top, Lena saw the settlement, a cluster of whitewashed buildings on a ridge, fields planted in neat rows, a schoolhouse with a bell tower, children already awake and playing near a well. Mrs. Harrow pointed. There, that's home. A woman named Ruth met them at the gate, middle-aged, her dress plain but clean, her face kind and unsurprised. We've been expecting you, she said. Reverend Pike sent word 3 days ago. She gestured to the buildings. We have housing ready. Small, but yours, and work, if you want it. Wages, not bondage. The freed families climbed down from the wagons, staring at the settlement like they couldn't believe it was real. One of the mothers, the one who'd crossed the river with her 2 children, touched Ruth's arm. This is ours, Ruth nodded. Yours, as long as you need it. The woman's tears fell freely now. She pulled her children close, her shoulders shaking. Ruth led them to the housing, a row of small cabins, each with a door that locked from the inside, a hearth, a table, a window facing east. Lena was given a cabin near the end. She stepped inside, her feet crossing the threshold into a space that was hers. The room was simple: 1 bed, 1 chair, a shelf for belongings, but it had walls, and a door, and silence that wasn't enforced by fear. She set down the papers on the table and stood in the doorway, letting the reality settle. Bo appeared beside her, carrying a bundle of firewood. I'll get this hearth started. Nights get cold up here. Lena watched him stack the wood, his movements practiced and sure. What about you? Where will you stay? Same row. To cabins down. Bo smiled. Close enough to help if you need it. Far enough to give you space. He struck a flint, and the kindling caught. Flames licked up around the wood, popping and crackling. Lena sat on the bed and felt the mattress straw, but clean, with a quilt folded at the foot. She ran her hand over the stitching, recognizing the pattern. Another map, another promise sewn into cloth. Thank you, she whispered. Bo looked up. For what? For trusting me. At the river, on the road, all of it. Bo's eyes softened. You earned that trust, child. You remembered when others forgot. You spoke when others stayed silent. That's courage. He stood, brushing ash from his hands. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start building. The settlement had a rhythm that Lena learned slowly over the following weeks. Work began at sunrise, tending gardens, mending fences, building furniture, teaching school, shared meals at noon in the common hall, evening gatherings on the church porch. Lena found work in the garden, her hands learning the feel of soil and seed. She planted rows of beans and squash, watered them each morning, watched them grow. Jonah, the young boy who'd been traveling with them, played with other children near the schoolhouse. His laughter was bright and unguarded, the kind that only came from feeling safe. Bo worked with the carpenters, building tables and chairs and cabinets. His hands rolled, scarred from years of work, but they moved with skill and care. At night, they gathered on the church porch. Lena told stories about the river crossing, the fog that had blinded the hunters, the seal impressions pressed side by side, the quilt that had mapped mercy into thread. The settlement listened, their faces solemn. You've got a gift for remembering, one man said, a blacksmith named Samuel. Use it well. I plan to, Lena replied. By autumn, the settlement had grown. More families arrived, drawn by word of safety and lawful papers. A second row of cabins was built. The schoolhouse expanded. Ruth approached Lena one morning with a ledger book and a pencil. You should write down what you remember. All of it. Roots, seals, names. So others can learn. Lena took the ledger, feeling its weight. I don't write well yet. Then you'll learn. We have a teacher now. She helped. The teacher was a young woman from Boston, educated, patient, passionate about literacy. She held classes in the schoolhouse every afternoon. Lena enrolled. She sat in the front row, the ledger book open, the pencil gripped tight. Her first written word was her name. The letters came slow, shaky, but recognizable. Her second word was freedom. The teacher stood at her shoulder, smiling. You're a fast learner. I've been storing words for years, Lena said. Now I can finally put them down. She filled the ledger slowly, carefully, over the course of months. Every memory she'd stored, every detail she'd catalogued. The river crossing fog, glare, the boatman's steady oars, the seal impressions, wax colors, letter forms, ribbon types, the quilt patterns, roads, crossings, symbols, the courthouse reading names spoken aloud, papers signed, freedom confirmed. When she finished, she showed the ledger to Reverend Pike. He read it slowly, his eyes moving over each page. When he looked up, his face was wet. This is witness, he said. This is testimony. Guard it. Lena nodded. I will, and I'll teach others to do the same. Winter came slow and cold. The settlement held a harvest supper on the church porch, tables loaded with food each family had contributed: roasted squash, cornbread, apple butter, dried venison. Lena sat between Bo and Jonah, surrounded by people who'd become neighbors, friends, family. Pike stood to offer a blessing. We give thanks for courage that crosses rivers, for memory that exposes lies, for mercy that guides and truth that holds. The crowd echoed, Amen. After the meal, someone started a hymn. The whole porch joined, their voices rising into the cold night air. Lena hummed the melody, her perfect pitch finding the harmony. The sound filled the space, warm and full. Even the former patroller, the one who'd bowed his head in shame at the courthouse, joined in, his voice rough but sincere. That night, Lena stood on her cabin porch with a lantern, looking at the road that led south. Jonah stood beside her, wrapped in a quilt. Will we ever go back? He asked. Lena shook her head. No, we go forward now. What if someone else needs to cross, like we did? Lena looked at the lantern in her hand. Then we teach them the route, we show them the maps, we pass on what we learned. Bo joined them, his breath visible in the cold air. You think the crossing's still safe? For those who know the way, yes, the fog still rolls in. The glare still blinds, the paths are still there. Pike's voice came from behind them. Then you keep remembering, and you keep teaching. Spring arrived with new challenges. A neighboring landowner tried to claim part of the settlement's property, saying the deeds were unclear. The settlement gathered to fight it. Lena was called as a witness. She stood in the county courthouse, different from the one where she'd exposed Crawford, but similar, and testified. She recited property descriptions from memory, boundary lines, deed dates, witness names, everything she'd heard once and stored forever. The judge listened, reviewed the documents, then ruled in the settlement's favor. The boundary stood outside. Samuel shook Lena's hand. "You've got a gift. Don't waste it." Lena smiled. "I don't plan to." By summer, the schoolhouse had been expanded again. More children enrolled, some from the settlement, others from neighboring farms. The teacher asked Lena to help with the younger students. You could teach memory techniques, how to store information without writing it down. Lena agreed. She worked with the children in the afternoons, showing them how to catalog details, how to lock images into mind, how to recall with precision. One girl, maybe 8 years old, struggled at first. She couldn't remember a simple list of 3 items. Lena knelt beside her. "Close your eyes. Picture the items in a room you know. Put each one in a specific place. Now walk through the room in your mind." The girl's face lit up. "I see them. Good. Now you'll always see them." Years passed. The settlement became a town official, recognized, with elected leaders and recorded deeds. Lena became the town's archivist, keeper of records and memories. She never forgot the river crossing. She never forgot the fog, the seals, the quilt that had mapped Mercy into thread. On quiet nights, she stood on the church porch with a lantern, watching the road, ready to signal the safe path for anyone who needed it. And sometimes, when the wind was right, she heard the river in the distance. Not a barrier anymore, but a passage crossed, a boundary between bondage and freedom, marked by fog and faith. Travelers still came, asking for routes. Lena showed them the maps, the quilts, the ledgers. She taught them what to watch for: wax colors, sealed depths, ribbon types, the tiny details that separated truth from lies. "Remember everything," she told them, "even if you can't write it down. Especially if you can't write it down." They listened. They learned. They crossed. One autumn evening, a young woman arrived at the settlement, exhausted, afraid, clutching a baby. She'd crossed the river 3 nights before, using a route someone had whispered to her. Lena met her at the gate. "You made it." The woman nodded, tears streaming. "I used the crossing near the bent willow. The fog came in just like they said. The hunters couldn't see." Lena smiled. "The fog's faithful." She led the woman inside, gave her food and a place to rest. Later, sitting by the fire, the woman asked, "How did you know the route would work?" "I crossed it once," Lena said, "and I remembered every detail. Then I taught others, and they taught others. The route lives as long as someone remembers it." The woman looked at her baby, sleeping peacefully. "I'll remember, and I'll teach her when she's old enough." "Good," Lena said. That's how Mercy passes forward. On Lena's 50th birthday, the settlement held a celebration on the church porch. Tables were set, food prepared, lanterns lit. Ruth presented Lena with a new quilt stitched by the women of the settlement, its pattern showing the river crossing, the courthouse steps, the roads that led to freedom. Lena ran her fingers over the stitching, recognizing every symbol. "It's beautiful. It's your story," Ruth said, "sewn so it won't be forgotten." Pike stood to offer a blessing. "We give thanks for Lena, who remembered when others forgot, who crossed when others feared, who taught when others stayed silent." The crowd raised their cups. To Lena, Lena stood, her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her chest. "I didn't do it alone. Bo guided me. Mrs. Harrow sheltered me. Pike protected the quilts. The boatman rode through fog. The clerk pressed the real seal. We all crossed together." She lifted her lantern. "And we're still crossing. Every time someone follows a map we made. Every time truth exposes a lie. Every time a child learns to remember." The crowd began to sing the same hymn from the courthouse porch, the same one Mama used to sing. Lena hummed along, her perfect pitch as clear as it had been at 11 years old on the river bank. As voices faded into the night, she looked toward the south, where the river ran dark and wide. Somewhere, someone was crossing tonight, following fog and faith. Trusting roots remembered, and Mercy passed forward. The lantern pointed the way home.